reminds of the Rakia, of the sky, and the sky reminds of one of the Kisei HaKoved. It's a very special effect, special quality it has. So Rashi tells us that Korach took these 250 men and he put on each one of them a talis that was made entirely of tchelas. That's what Rashi says. Not one string of tchelas, but the whole talis was made of tchelas. Symbolizing this principle of kol ha'edo kulam k'deish. And he said to Moshe, this talis that is completely tchelas, do I have to put in tzitzis within it and to put in a string of tchelas or not? Chayev v'soy p'tura. Is it chayev and tzitzis or not? And Moshe answered, of course, it's chayev. And they started laughing at him. How can it be? A talis that is made of some other material or other color, one string of tchelas satisfies its need. The talis is completely of tchelas, you need tzitzis. And other such misholim that the Medrash brings down. It would seem their argument was so powerful that they were in fact able to convince many leaders in the community, in the congregation, of the validity of their argument. What in fact was the mistake? What was the error? We know that Korach had a terrific mapola. You know what mapola means? Mapala. He fell down very low. He was swallowed up at the ground. He was punished very severely. Obviously, there was a very grave error. But superficially, it seems like a rational argument. The error, one of the principles that Korach was trying to bring out, and one of the principal arguments were that by making these separations by Yidden, that there is Moshe is in one category, Aaron, Kohanim, Levim, and so forth, you're breaking the community up into different groups, and you are disturbing the achdus, you're disturbing the peace in the community. Again, it seems to be a rational argument. Let everybody be equal, and there will be no jealousy, there will be no differences. What, in fact, is this mistake, the mistake in this? And in order to explain it, I want to go off a little bit, slightly in a different area, and then we'll come back to this. We all know that Hashem created the world, because it says so in the Torah. God created the world. And God created the world in such a way that He created it, and then in a certain sense, the way it appears, that He is completely hidden. He's in the background. You don't see Him at all. in effect, it looks like he created a separate entity. He stepped back from it. If, God forbid, we would consider the union that God stepped back from the world, which we know is not true, which we'll discuss, then if you want to maintain unity in the world, if you want to maintain peace in the world, how do you do it? You make sure that everyone is equal. Everyone is together. We know in the time of much earlier, what's known the Tower of Babel, the Migdal Babel. This was in time of Avraham Avinu. That the first thing that people decided to do, one of the first things that they did, they decided they would build a tower, a very tall tower. And this tall tower would symbolize their unity. And this will assure that they will all be together, all be one. You all know what happened there, but Badei Hafloga, that Hashem did not allow them to finish the tower. He disturbed this whole thing. Why did Hashem disturb this whole thing? Because what the intent over there was, and the underlying thought behind it was, that if we build a unity together, then we don't need Hashem. We will stand together and balance and support one another. We don't need Hashem. The purpose for which Hashem created the world, you all learned in Chassidus, is not that the world should be an entity unto itself. The purpose is that ultimately, even though the world is a physical world, a very lowly world, but in this lowly world there should be recognition of the presence of Hashem. I want to discuss this briefly. What is the significance of this? If Hashem wanted to have a world, so what's so significant that He should be recognized in the world? If the world can stand on its own, and it'll be in peace and harmony, so who cares how it is maintained, how it is, how it supports itself? It's going. The answer is that when you have an entity, even a whole big world, if this big world does not represent any particular meaning and purpose, then it is a dead entity. It has no significance, no value. Like we discussed one time in the past, that when the world was first created, up until the time that Adam Rishon was created in the 5.5 days of creation, before Adam was created, the world had absolutely no significance. There were animals in there were trees, but they absolutely stood for nothing. When Adam Rishon came, and Adam had the wisdom to recognize who created the world and what's the real purpose and significance and meaning of it, then everything took a different position. Like we know, I mentioned this many times, that Adam Rishon was given the task of naming, of giving a name to everything that God created. Thank you very much. Everything that God created, he was given the task to name it. How did he know how to name it? He named it because he understood its particular function and purpose in the world. Because he recognized that everything has a function, everything has a purpose. But as long as Adam Rishon didn't come, every creature was just roaming the fields to no purpose whatsoever. That's a meaningless world. God does not create a meaningless world. A meaningless world has no basis, has no real basis for existing and for being. Let us take an example from our own experience. If somebody builds up a business, and the business produces some material, produces some machine, whatever it is, and it produces it very efficiently, and it produces a good machine. But then, this machine that it produces people don't want to buy it for some reason. They rather buy something else. And therefore, this whole factory and this whole enterprise does not bring a profit. So here you're looking at a fully developed factory that is producing very good units, but it doesn't bring a profit, which means it doesn't have an ultimate purpose. What does the owner do? He closes it down. Why? Because it doesn't have a real function. It doesn't have a real function. So just to exist and just to be is not a purpose. And this is what Hashem prevented in the time of the Deir HaFloga in the Bovel. But they wanted to create a unity. He said, if we have unity, we will exist without Hashem. Without Hashem, what is the world about? What does it stand for? In effect, this is the concept, the meaning of having unity which is based on equality. Everybody is equal, which means it's a unity that is contained within the world itself. What is true unity? And what is like the source of true unity? True unity is not something that is contained, that exists in the world itself. True unity exists in the world only because there is recognition of Hashem's presence in the world. That's the only reason it exists. Again, let us take an illustration from something from ourselves. A human being has many parts. He has hands, feet, mouth, nose. He has all kinds of. It consists of many different parts. All these parts operate in perfect unity. Why do they operate in perfect unity? Even though they each have their own natures. The hand has a different nature than the foot. Why do they operate in perfect unity? Because they all recognize, all the limbs, all the parts of the person, recognize that their function is to fulfill the will that's in the brain. They all have a function to fulfill a higher purpose, the will that's in the brain. If they were not subservient to the brain, and they would just work in tandem together, but not subservient to the brain, then it's a meaningless unity. This brings us back to what happened over here in the Midbar by Korach. Korach said, the entire congregation is holy, and therefore they all, each one has a direct connection to Hashem, and they don't need any structure. They don't need any structure. They don't need the Moshe and Aaron and Kohanim and so forth. And for this, he brought the example of the talis shekulak tchelis, a talis that is completely made of tchelis. What is a talis that's completely made of tchelis? A garment, enwraps the person completely. He takes a person over completely. It covers him over. So therefore, he's saying like this. Yes, it is true. Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching Torah. Aaron is doing korbanos, and everyone. There is different type of hashpor, that's called. Every different type of effect that everyone has. But why do I need this? If I have a talis, if I have that which envelops the entire congregation, everyone together, then I don't need the particular teachings. Then everybody connects together through this talis, through this overall unity.
I mean, is it like representative of Hashem to say that we're completely encompassed in this? Why do we need to go through a particular avenue?
Mm-hmm. I'll come back to with greater clarity as we go on. Effectively, what he was talking about is something that Chassidus discusses at great length, with great detail. And the principles involved is that which is called makif and pnimi. As you hear the term, everybody heard the term makif and pnimi. Makif means that which surrounds, and pnimi is that which comes internal, which is internalized. That's the same thing as soiv and mamale in a different context. But in terms of in terms of a human avodah, it's called makif and pnimi. Soiv and mamale, the way the inyonim are l'mayla, and this is the way it is. It reflects itself in the human being. Makif and pnimi. One of the examples of makif versus pnimi is Emunah. Emunah, faith. Faith is a very important principle. We can't be without faith. That's the highest, the Nekudas are highest in a person. That's what makes him alive. But at the same time, the Gemara says that if we should rely exclusively on Emunah, on this aspect, then it's conceivable, the Gemara says. The Gemara expresses it very, very simply. The Gemara says, Gan ve'apum nachtarte rachmona kami, which means that a Ganav, when he is ready to break through the tunnel and to get on to steal, which is doing an Aveira, what does he do at that moment? He prays to God for success. And he does not recognize any contradiction between going to steal and praying to God that he should succeed. Why is that? The reason for that is that which is in the Emunah does not penetrate one's intellect. He doesn't really understand what this is about. He doesn't understand its significance. What does it mean? What does it mean truly that God created the world? Is this just a historical fact? We're saying God created the world, okay, that happened 6,000 years ago. Or does that define the world in a different light? Does that give the world a different meaning when we say God created the world? And this is the difference between Makif and Pnim. Even though that we all have Emunah, we all have faith, which means we all are enwrapped in this garment that's Kula Tchelis. It's all holy. But that is not really enough. We have to recognize the significance of it in our thinking mind, in our intellect, and in our heart. We have to understand what it means that God created the world. Not just, I know that God created the world. How does that translate in the way I understand the world? How does it translate the way I behave in the world? And how does it translate in terms of what is the purpose of the world? It's not just a holiness in so to speak, in a general sense. This is the significance of the fact that we say that even a talis that is completely of tchelis, it still needs tzitzis. What is the tzitzis? Tzitzis are little fringes that hang on the corner of the talis. What does that represent? What does that stand for? It says like this. Yes, indeed, this talis is completely of tchelis. It's a very holy thing. Yet, in order for this talis to have an effect on the person, it has to be further translated in individual strings. And these individual strings represent mitzvahs. And they represent Torah and seichel of Torah. It cannot just come as a general thing, oh, this is all holy. It has to be translated in specific aspects, such specificity that our simple brain can understand and can relate to. we spoke in the past that learning Torah is not only when you learn deep and great concepts. Even if one learns the Aleph base, he's already learning Torah. What is how does this actually affect the person? So we give the example as follows. If a person is thirsty and there is a lake of water in front of him, he's thirsty, there's a lake of water, let me jump into the lake. If he jumps into the lake, he won't be able to drink the water. You can't drink directly from the lake. In order for the water to go inside internally to him, he has to take a little cup of water out of the lake and feed it to himself in little bits. He can't feed it to himself directly from the lake. What happens when he feeds it to himself in little bits? So he say, oh, it's so tedious. I'm learning, I'm feeding the water, or the same thing, I'm learning Torah. I'm learning a word for word, another word, another word. This is so tedious. It's hard work. It's hard work, and it's not interesting. It's not interesting, right? It challenges your patience. You really want to get into something. But what happens in reality? What happens in reality is just as when a person drinks cold water. He drinks little bits, but these little bits enter internally in himself. It gets internalized. And it's disseminated throughout his whole body. And the whole body comes to life. The whole body is refreshed with it. The same thing is in Torah and mitzvahs. Yes, indeed, there is a tediousness in how you obtain it, how you get to it. But every word that one learns, if he truly digests it, like water, he swallows it and it goes inside. If he truly internalizes it and he understands it fully, what he has learned, then that enters into his soul, enters into his person. And it disseminates throughout his whole person. And it gives life to his whole soul. This is called pnimi. Pnimi means it's internalized. To internalize something, it takes work. But once it's internalized, then it becomes a source of life and health to the whole person. So now, let us go back, understanding this principle, let us go back and talk about this machlokes of Korach and translate it to us in specific terms. We mentioned many times the Rambam, where the Rambam says that the principle doesn't let go, does it? The Rambam says that the principle of knowing Hashem, of knowing that there is a creator, is not just knowing that Hashem created the world at some time in the past. But the Rambam goes very specific, and he says that ultimately we have to delve into this concept and understand it to the point where we recognize that in fact, in my mind, there cannot possibly be a world if not for the fact that Hashem creates it. In other words, the understanding, the pnimius of Breishis Bara Elokim Hashemayim v'Ha'aretz, that God created the heavens and the earth, the full understanding of that bipnimius is not just to know it, but to understand it to such a degree that when I look at the world, I don't see, I cannot see world without also recognizing the Creator, without seeing that there has a Creator. Because the world without a Creator cannot exist. This is the meaning of Pnimius. This is the meaning that this concept has been internalized in one's brain, in one's thinking process, where the world and God are not two separate things. The world cannot exist without God. One can learn ideas and all kinds of ideas, and he understands it all, so to speak, in a superficial, in a general manner. Then when he goes out from the worlds of the yeshiva and he sees the world, it's the same world that he left before. Nothing changed. And therefore, all the difficulties and all the challenges and all the confusion that the world represented before coming into yeshiva, it represents the same confusion. If we take it only the makif, in other words, yes, we entered the walls of the yeshiva, we were surrounded, we were enwrapped in a talis that's kulat chelis, that's completely of chelis. We were in the heavenly clouds. But we did not internalize that. Then nothing happened to our world. It remained exactly the same. Nothing happened to our world if we did not internalize this. If we did not understand it with our own seichel. If we only experienced it, but we did not really understand it with our own seichel. This is called pnimius. This is the same, if you think of the original, the simple example, the same as jumping into a lake of water. It doesn't do anything for you if you're thirsty. The real ultimate effect of Hashem's presence in the world is when it is internalized. And as I said, internalized means that it's understood in one's mind to such a degree that he cannot see the world without seeing that it is a creation. And when he can turn around and see the world independent of the Creator, then the world can draw him back, just right back into to where he started from.
Does that mean he didn't internalize it enough? Like he didn't build the base well enough?
Right.
Missing? He has to start again? Or?
No, he doesn't have to start again. The thing is like this. There are obviously many, many levels in internalization. But the principle is that any amount of internalization, any amount, if he had understood clearly in his mind, even for one moment, that the world does not exist but for the fact that Hashem creates it, that has such a profound effect on the person that he can never forget it. Even though he still sees the world, he's still not completely transformed, so to speak. He's not a tzaddik. But it has a very profound effect. Just like a drop of water that a person takes internally.
Are you saying that? Are you saying that the view that when you look at the world, you see that it's entirely, you can't look at the world and not see that it's entirely dependent on the Creator, and that it's entirely? Is this the idea of the talis made totally of techelis? I might be trying to apply the analogy to what you're saying, but too much.
Talis made and talis chelas means that when I close my eyes, I believe everything is created by Hashem. Mm-hmm. But when I open my eyes, I see the world. Because it's not internalized. It's not being fed piecemeal and explained. You know something? This watch has a godly spark in it. This table has a godly spark in it.
So does it all work into this analogy? The reason why if the talis has just one thread woven into it of techelis, why it's exempt from putting sittis on it then?
This one thread represents that which trickles out, which explains. It says, yes, the talis is holy, but how do I get to that holiness? It is through the thread of mitzvahs. This thread represents mitzvahs. It is through mitzvahs I can connect to that holiness, not directly. This conflict that we saw, that is illustrated by the machlekes of Korach. This conflict is something which exists in a person constantly. We're always inclined to reach out for the interesting, for the bright, for something which is exciting and interesting. And it seems to us that which is exciting and interesting, we get excited about it, we get aroused, and we seem to be uplifted. And we have, so to speak, this holy experience. When it comes down to working and internalizing any of the knowledge, for this we don't have patience. For this we don't have patience. And two things: we don't have patience for it. Then we say, why do I need it for? If I can get excited, I have the whole thing right away. Why do I need to internalize it? So for this, we have in the Torah relating this whole machloikis of Korach with Moshe to teach us this very important principle. That yes, indeed, we're all holy, and we all have holy neshamas. Yet, in order to reveal that neshama, in order to connect to the holiness of this neshama, we have to use tzitzis. We have to use individual mitzvahs. We have to learn individual words of Torah. It's not enough to claim, okay, I'm holy. To connect it to what I started saying in the beginning, which is an important principle. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe actually asks this question in Tanya. He brings down from the Zohar and he asks this question. It says in the Zohar that in order to have the Shekhinah dwell on a person, he has to have Torah mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe says, why does he need Torah mitzvahs? He has a holy neshama. Why does he need Torah mitzvahs? And the Alter Rebbe explains that yes, indeed, he has a holy neshama. But we have to understand just as what we started saying, that if we create unity in the world from within the world itself, it only has worldliness in it. The true unity in the world is only when the world submits itself to a godly presence. Just like we said, just like all the limbs of the body are submissive to the brain. So the godly presence, the higher presence, is what unites everything in the world. The similar Indian is in this. The neshama is very holy. But what mitzvahs do, and what Torah does, is that it connects a person not just to the holiness of his neshama, but it connects a person to Hashem himself. This connection to Hashem himself, this is what constitutes the real unity in the world. Not a unity that is contained within the world itself, but the unity that Hashem unites everything together. The principle that I wanted to hopefully expose to you is this union of Makif and Pnimi, and that we should understand the importance of learning in such a way that not just I know what it says and I can repeat what it says, but not necessarily that it makes sense to me, not necessarily that I really understand it with my own mind, my own brain. I know what it says, that's sufficient. I learned this page. I spend my time well, and I can answer the questions on the test. We have to understand that any little bit, just like in the case of the water, any little bit that we work through and we understand with our own brain, that it begins to make sense to us, that's the real transformation. That's the real value. This is when it's internalized, and this is when it has the real effect on us. And this is when the Torah becomes, as it says, the Torah is like food and water to the soul. Otherwise, we are just inside it, but we don't really absorb it internally. In order to affect this, in order to internalize it, just like when a person eats, he cannot take a bite bigger than what his mouth can chew. The expression, a bit of more than he can chew. So he's got it in his mouth, but it stays in the mouth. You have to take bits by bits. And when you take the bits, you have to chew it over and over and over until it becomes so broken down and so chewed over that it can internalize inside the person. He once explained, in one of this, all the way back maybe a couple of years ago, we eat food. The food is a piece of food that's outside of my body. I go and I eat it. And it becomes part. How does it become part of me? This is external. How does it become part? You know what happens? What happens is we chew it up. Then afterwards it goes into the intestines and it gets digested, further digested. And it gets digested to such a degree that it gets so refined. It gets so refined that it just enters the body through the membrane. You know what the membrane is? Through the skin. And it goes right in, because it becomes one thing. It becomes so refined until it becomes automatically one with the body. This is how learning takes place as well. We're learning and we know what it says at first. Then afterwards we digest it more and digest it more until it becomes so refined and it becomes so united with our mind that we begin to think that way. It becomes one with our mind. What? Like?
Engraved in the person?
It's more than engraved. Yeah, it becomes part of you. Like I explained before from the Rambam. The Rambam says, this is very clear, you can look it up in the Rambam, that the principle of knowing Hashem means that if one would think for a moment, there is no Hashem, then he immediately recognizes, then nothing can exist. In other words, this understanding that Hashem creates the world has to become such a clear view, a clear knowledge in the person, that all existence depends on it. Then it becomes part of his knowledge, part of him. And then it really gives him life. And then it gives him life, and it gives him guidance in life. It puts him in a world in a meaningful world. It gives him a path in life. And gives him a success. But it's very important that we take things bit by bit and we think it through and we ask ourselves the question, do I really think this way? Why don't I think this way? What's bothering me about it? What am I not understanding? Until it gets refined to such an extent that, yes, I fully understand it. This is the principle that, yes, in fact, we are all holy, and yet Hashem gave us a Torah, and He told us that we have to learn it and learn it and learn it until it becomes one with us. The fact that we have holy neshamas is only a means that we should be able to understand the Torah. But without really understanding it, we have nothing. And Korach, who came to Moshe and argued, Kol Ho'eda Kulam Gdeishim, the whole congregation are all holy, he elevated the people to the highest height as all holy. What happened to him? He fell down to the bottom. That's, he elevated, he said, they're all holy. Right?
But he's not really elevate everyone. He just...
well, that's what he claimed. He said, well, they're all holy.
Sure, they were holy, right?
Yes, but that's not true, they're holy. But that's not the end of it. He said they're all holy, they don't need anything more. And that brought him down to the pit.
He brought down people also to the pit, right?
Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, as we always do, what I want to say is, it may be difficult, it may be tedious, but you have to understand every moment is worth the effort. Every effort is worth it. Every effort. We have a klal. You know what a klal is? We have a rule, a chasidim, that precisely that which is difficult, that means that this is your avodah. That which comes easy to you, then that means that this is not your avodah. It comes easy. You already did it. That where it is difficult, that shows that this is what you're supposed to do. Because that's where your hell and v'hesed, that's where your klipa is, and you have to break through this klipa. I personally have witnessed, have seen Bachrim in my time who were not the brightest, didn't have the biggest heads, but he decided that he wants to know how to learn, and he sat day and night, and he became a lam. Understood Torah. Particularly, all of us here who have a very limited time, a very limited opportunity to accomplish what we need to accomplish. We must not shy away from this which is difficult. We must not look for that which is interesting and it's pleasant. That's interesting and it's pleasant, but that's not what's going to bring life to you. What's going to bring life to you is the place where you work hard. And that's going to make a breakthrough, and it's going to make a mensch out of you. Everybody knows what that means? To make a mensch?
Human being.
A human being. That's right. make you stand on your feet, and make you know where you stand, who you are. And I'm sure that you'll all be successful. I'm sure you'll all work very hard. Only a child shies away, goes to play ball because it's more interesting. When we have responsibility, we look for that which is difficult, because that's where we really accomplish. And that really it changes us. It changes our view of the world, changes our view of ourselves, and it makes, as I said, it makes real people. We should all be successful, and we'll all be real people and build our homes on a solid foundation.